You are the world expert on what you like in a photograph. I hope in this video to show you how to turn that expertise into improvements in your photography. The central idea behind this video is that you can improve your photography substantially by just paying close attention to your own photos and by trying all sorts of variations when you photograph a subject. Different lenses, different points of view, close up, further away, from lower left, lower right, etc., with flash and without. Then upload your photos to your computer so that you can really see the details. Especially when you notice something you like in a photo, make enough of a big deal of that discovery that your eye will remember it and look for similar opportunities when you're out photographing. I said you should upload the photos to your computer rather than study them in your camera for a reason. The screen on your smartphone or camera is just too small for your eye to get the effect we are looking for. Bright sunlight can make it even more difficult, and zooming in on the photograph just isn't as good for training your eye, however adequate it might be for details. Now, I do not want to be misunderstood. You can learn a lot from photography workshops, articles and videos on composition and lighting, and so forth. You can also learn from critical studies of old masters' paintings, or most anything else that you find visually appealing. If you see something you like, ask yourself what it is about it that you like. These are ways you can train your eye, just as I hope to convince you here that you can train your eye by studying your own photos. Some years back I took this photo, really liked it, and now my eye looks for similar opportunities. I discovered that I especially like light filtering through the leaves of trees, whether through gaps or through leaves that are a bit transparent, and I like a mixture of shades of green. And I especially like fall colors in the mix. My eye is now sensitized to these likes and searches scenes for them. While still standing at this ocotillo plant just inside the west entrance of Big Bend National Park, I took a photo of one of its blossoms. The electronic viewfinder of my camera will show me whether I have a good exposure, but it can't show me afterwards how good the focus was unless I zoom in on the photo. I usually do not bother to do that, which takes some time and fiddling, but just take 2 or 3 more shots, figuring at least one won't have the camera shake or wind-blown blossom. So I was pleased when I uploaded this photo that evening, generally considering it the shot of the day. There's a law of nature that says whenever I'm photographing flowers, the wind shall blow hard. So my eye was trained to look for red leaves against a pretty blue sky. I've been making frequent visits to Waco's Cameron Park Zoo, a much better zoo than one expects from a small city like Waco. And of course I take photographs. Initially many of my photos were like this one, which I might call a typical zoo snapshot. There was almost a story here, as the giraffe running caused the female greater kudu to think maybe she should run too to get away from whatever was after the giraffe. I decided in the end, though, that there really wasn't much of interest here, so didn't even bother to correct the overexposure. I soon learned that I liked close-ups rather than photos that showed the entire animal. One of the first elements of photo composition a photographer learns is a so-called rule of thirds. That rule is that quite often the best place for the subject of photo is not in the dead center, but at a point of intersection of 2 1/3 lines, lines 1/3 of the way across and 1/3 up from the bottom or down from the top. See which you like better here. My eye doesn't see much difference here between center and rule of thirds, but my point in bringing up the subject is for you to see which you prefer. When your eye prefers a certain composition, think about it a little, partly to make sure the preference is real, but also to reinforce that preference to help your eye see more opportunities. I have found that I like shaded water, such as in this photo of a robin taking a bath, so my eye has learned to look for photo ops when such water is available. Here's another look at an early one, according to the rule of thirds. Now I'll show you how I stumbled upon the composition trick of having only the subject in sharp focus. You do not need to know this in order to use the technique, which you might already have known quite well, and if not, well, you do not need to know how I found it in order to use it. So why am I taking up video time to show you how I discovered the technique? If you make it a point while on a photography expedition to shoot a subject every which way you can think of, you will find new techniques of your own. Try different lenses, shoot from down low and up high, from left and right, with a flash and without. Try anything that makes sense and some things that maybe don't make much sense. Digital film is free, very nearly at least, and so is processing. I was already woke when I took this particular photo, but it's the type of photo I took the first almost 10 years I had a digital camera. It's a landscape. Landscape photos are characterized by having a foreground, a middle ground, and a distant background, all in sharp focus. Early on, when I wasn't photographing in a national park, I was photographing a field of wildflowers, or perhaps only a patch of wildflowers. This photo is from 2010. If I come across this patch next spring, I'll probably take much of the same photo as here. Then I'll go on to take another half-dozen vignettes with blurred background. You see, my thought process, if there was any thought involved, was that wildflower fields are obviously landscapes, so wildflower patches must be too, and therefore anything with a wildflower in it should all be in sharp focus. Or perhaps I just thought everything in a photo should be in sharp focus. One day on a wildflower hunt 200 miles from home, for no good reason except to see what happened, I put a long telephoto lens on my camera and took this shot. I probably do not need to tell you that I was disappointed that evening when I uploaded it to my computer. My beautiful patch of paintbrushes is all out of focus. Well, maybe the patch will be as pretty next year. Darn. Wait a second. Isn't that interesting? That area about 1/3 up from the bottom is interesting in spite of not having anything interesting in it, just because it's in sharp focus. I had discovered something well known by knowledgeable photographers. Telephoto lenses tend to have shallow depths of field, even when using the smallest aperture. This photo was with a 600mm telephoto at f/22. So 2 weeks later, when I came to this fence row with the cowboy boots, I decided I'd put that telephoto back on and get a terrific photo with the boots starting off out of focus, extending up and to my left, gradually coming into focus, then going back out of focus. I put on the telephoto and got the photo, but was too disappointed in it generally to bother with any post-processing. Later, I'll show you improvements I could easily have made with simple post-processing, and you can then judge for yourself whether perhaps I gave up too soon. In the meantime, though, do you see that red poppy down there, the other side of the fence posts? This was my shot of the day, and I now use the same focus, out of focus technique frequently when photographing flowers. Here's another example. I think I probably used some flash in this one too to further separate the flower from the background. Here's another shot that used flash so that the background would be dark. We won't dwell on how other bits and pieces here might be cleaned up in post-processing. I am recommending that you make post-processing of your photos part of your standard routine. First, it provides a good opportunity to study a photo to see what you like about it, which will lead to ideas for improving your photography generally. However, most photos benefit from minor post-processing. Some need it badly. Of course, some photos aren't worth any additional time from you at all. You can toss them into the trash, or keep them just in case. Computer storage is relatively cheap. So what would I do to improve this photo, and how would I do it? Adobe's Lightroom and Photoshop are the gold standard of post-processing programs and are what I use now. But they'll cost you a little more than $10 a month, and you'll have to spend several years at Hogwarts studying how to use the magic tools in Photoshop. Paint.net is freeware, although they'll gladly accept donations, and it has considerable power. GIMP, which is New Image Processing, has most of the tools of Photoshop, and it is also free, and they also accept donations. There are online tutorials available for all of these programs. I started with Paint.net maybe 12 years ago, graduated to GIMP for 5 or 6 years, then moved to Lightroom, later adding Photoshop. I'll use Paint.net here to show you how I'd go about improving this photo. For starters, I'd erase, or clone out, that telephone pole. I hate telephone poles. Then I'd work on the slight overexposure. All post-processing programs have some way to change brightness and contrast, generally using sliders, which would probably be adequate here. But the Curves tool offers a little more control and is basically simple to use. Just fiddling with the adjustments will show you how the tool works. I do not want to take the time here to go into detail, but basically the idea of the Curves tool is to give you fine control over each shade of brightness, from pure black to pure white. We see here that I made dark areas darker and light areas lighter, producing greater contrast in the middle brightness. Way too much contrast. That's a lot better to my eye, just a slight reduction in brightness throughout all the middle tones. Probably just what would have happened if I had used the brightness slider. This last example is here only to show you that the Curves tool allows you to specify many points. That is, you can select several regions or large shifts in brightness as you think you need. I hope you found this video useful, or at least interesting. Take lots of photos, study them to train your eye to find more good subjects, then trust your trained eye to help you find the best way to compose your photos. Most important of all, enjoy your photography and shoot the way you like best.